Welcome to Soulful Practices Podcast. I'm your host, Michelle Holling-Brooks, and over the past 20 years, I have been on a journey of healing and awakening. I'm also a coach and practitioner for clients on their journey of unbridling their true self. The number one question I'm asked is, what meditation or practice will help me reach my goals? While there is no one meditation or secret mantra that will unlock our own awakening, there is a doorway that will lead us there. And that's the doorway of learning and cultivating the skills of self-reflection and contemplation. Each episode of this podcast offers you pocket teachings and practices that you can implement right away to help you courageously connect with living your authentic soul-led life. Let's dive into this week's episode. Michelle Holling-Brooks here, host of Soulful Practices, and we are back for a part two. This is a two-part episode, so 46 and 47 of Soulful Practices go together. And that's because I kind of got into it and realized that they just really wanted to have a richness and a depth to each one. And I could have probably guessed that because the topic of this episode is the purpose of life. So that's worthy of two episodes, I think, right? And the teacher that's kind of walking us into this one with a quote that's kind of holding us, that we're kind of building and exploring off of, is from Thich Nhat Hanh, and it's from his book, The Heart of Buddha Teaching. And he said that the purpose of life is to be ourselves, not to be searching elsewhere for that, and also not to be trying to become somebody else, but to recognizing that we are wonderful just as we are. So, if this is your first time hearing that quote, just let that sink in. The purpose of our life is not to strive, to achieve, to gather. Of course, those are amazing things. I often get asked this question, is like, hey, Michelle, I don't want to feel bad about wanting as much abundance and health and wellness and all the other facets of life, from my career life to financial life to housing to like recreation and fun and travel and expressing and manifesting the things that are in my hearts, my dreams, my desires. I mean, I just got finished. I don't have it right here with me in the finished form. I don't know where that is, but the Sacred Witness Oracle Suite. It's coming out, and that was a dream, right? And so creating things like that is, of course, that's okay, because, and we dived into a little bit of what is called spider energy and the last one, in exploring that idea that, each day we are called to create something. It could be little, just like tending to something in our mundane, quote, everyday life. It could be big, creating this beautiful web. But what we don't want to do is attach our worth, our value, that is the purpose and reason I'm alive, to that. Because what happens if something happens to that? What happens if all of a sudden that changes? I've had a few iterations within my own life of my quote purpose work. If somebody asked me now, like, what is it that you do, Michelle? I would say I do one thing and one thing only. The way I do it is many different facets, but I teach and I explore and I work. I do my own work. So I teach what I work and what I do, um, with one thing and one thing only, is how do we deeply empower ourselves, liberate ourselves from old ways of being that at some point kind of served us, or maybe served us so beautifully that we loved it, but we're being asked to grow. And that's why the name of my organization is Unbridled Change. I really kind of laughed and I fought 17 years ago. It's kind of crazy to think of 17 years ago that Unbridled Change. We're in our quote anniversary month with it right now when this is coming out. And that it's that when that name first dropped in, I was like, what? I don't like change. Why would the heck would I want to unbridle and let it run rampant in my life? I like pinpointed, controlled, measurable. I love my SMART goals. I love my sense of being in control. And I chuckled at myself, and I was sitting, I remember exactly where I was. My oldest daughter had just been barely a month old. So yes, if you're doing the math right, that means I started Unbridled Change when I had just had my first daughter, and she was a month old. And I was sitting, and trigger warning, but I don't think it should be a trigger warning. But I was nursing her, and I just happened to be kind of like she was a snacker, and so it was just easier to kind of like let her do her thing when she needed to do it. And I had gotten the guidance that I was going to start this organization, and I was sitting there and I was trying to think of some names as I was watching her, and the name Unbridled Change dropped into my head, the pun on horses because I'm a equine person as well, but also that idea of what is a bridle. A bridle is the way that we think we create control for a horse. The horse is 1,200 pounds. If that horse wants to go a different direction, there is no little piece of leather and no piece of metal in their mouth that is going to shift them into a different direction. So it's all an illusion. So the question is really for me, and what I was tracking in that part of my stage of working with horses in my own development was really liberty riding and connections, and working with horses without the confines of a ring to force them to interact with me, or these different things to force the communication and the different things. It's like, how do I build that relationship to where it's true choice, based off of the complete right of that sentient being to say yes, no, and maybe to me. And just because I swing my leg over on the back doesn't mean that I get to say everything and I get to be in control. Is how do we step into that relationship, honoring and loving each other? So this word unbridling was very up for me, and it's scary. It's scary as heck to say, I'm going to take off something that feels like I had a little illusion. It's not real control, it's just the illusion of control. And if I have control, even for a brief period of time, where did that control come from? For most equine world, it's from creating a sense of helplessness and hopelessness in the horse. It's not actually partnership. And I absolutely did not work with horses that way on my own. And so that was another reason for the name Unbridled when I came in. And uh, as I was sitting there and I was working through these different aspects of it, and I was thinking, I was like, wow, this business is going to be interesting to see what it unbridles in me. And here we are 17 years later, and wow, has it brought me into areas that I couldn't even conceive. It's challenged me in ways that seemed um, un, un, unpassable at times. And it's brought me into a depth and an awareness of self that I had no idea was there. Right. And so the purpose of Unbridled Change is on so many levels. It does that for the beings that are in connection with it, like you through this podcast, but it's also for my own journey, right? And that came from me just making that web every day, asking the question, what wants to be created today? And can I be in that true self versus the conditioned self versus the personal self? And can I open to the heart being that mystical heart? So, in that last episode, we really dove into this idea that we need to be willing to witness what it is we're actually up to. What are we weaving in our life that day? What are the threads that we're weaving with? What is the daily purpose of, hey, I woke up today. Hey, I am being asked to engage today. And how am I engaging that day? Am I looking for all the ways that it's been torn down and ruffled or disturbed? Am I looking with a lens of a thread that's of victimization or defensiveness or irritation? Or am I bringing a different energy to that task of my day? Right. So you definitely can build beautiful things. I don't want anybody to get the idea that you can't have like abundance and wellness and goals and ideas and all those other things. That was a question that kind of came out of the last one. But yeah, you can have that. Just how do we hold that? If we need, and this is the questions right at the end of episodes 45 that was offered to you as some beautiful reflection questions at that altar of life, is if I need that, what I'm weaving, what I'm up to, what I'm creating in that day to be validated and honored and um, given worth from an outside source, I'm on tricky territory. right? The chance means that I'm probably in an interwoven web that has a lot of that survival level self in it, and a lot of that personal level self, and then maybe not honoring the support that can come from the heart and that soul with that strength, with that knowing that I was able to intrinsically match. And sometimes that means delayed gratification or fully letting go of something that I personally just really want. I want it to be this way. I think it should be this way. I know it would be fabulous if it was this way, and letting that go. And then so I can show up the way I feel guided. And then sometimes it's really holding the hands of those little ones of me that are super nervous, really fearful, really thinking like, whoa, we are rocking the boat with this choice. It's gonna make so and so mad. They're gonna have an opinion of us. They're gonna get irritated. They're gonna whatever that story is, and we're gonna have to hold those little ones' hands within us and really say, it's okay. Yes, that was your truth. Yes, you have this whole fleet of protective mechanisms and beliefs and ways of being that says, don't show up this way. And we're going to lovingly say to them, I see you, I understand that. And yet we're asking our body, our physical nervous system to develop new pathways, pathways that are rooted in love, rooted in the strength and the courage of our heart and our soul, and starting to soften fear having more authority over our physicality of our being and our aura and who we are and how we see ourselves, and love having more of authority over those things. So, what I didn't quite get to in part one is the part two that I wanted to dive into because I think it's really up for a lot of us right now. Is that this idea of being ourselves and showing up for ourselves is so important right now, because I believe this is how we're going to usher in the changes that need to happen collectively for us. For me personally, in the past few weeks, really the past few months slash year, this has been a real source of inner like clashing of storms within me. There are these real parts of me that have visceral responses to what I'm witnessing in the world as a collective humanity and environmentally. What I'm witnessing personally within my own country, of what's happening and the stages that we're at of really having to come back and really look at how do we honor liberty and happiness for all, full stop. No qualifiers, no whatever. Like that's one of those values. And where are we falling short of that? And what does that look like? And what is my role in helping to establish that frequency in that, and bringing that not only to myself, to my girls, to community, and rippling out in ways that I don't know what that is, right? And so it's easy to feel overwhelmed personally with my own personal life of what it's trying to do and what it's up to, right? And that unbridled change of constant, like being in that stage of awakening, growth, and integration. It's a real change path that I got given a little heads up on 17 years ago that was going to be part of my daily rhythm, was a real okay, you got that one. Next, next, and next. Um, be careful what you name things. But this one wanted to name itself. I didn't name it. I just followed the bouncing ball, right? And so, how do I balance that plus balance this other? And we can get really gummed up in here, and we can want to quote supersize itis life's purpose again. Like, I have to build a web that holds all of this or changes that. And I have to be able to see how that happens. And if I don't see it, then I've fallen short, then I haven't done it, and then I'm not doing enough. And we just like spin out, and then our body tries to help us out and it's like, whoa, you were way out of balance here. And it tries to pull us back, right? And so then we end up with different states of sadness and grief and loss and disbelief and apathy that comes in trying to create this balance of this is too much to hold. And so many of us are taught that we have to hold that in our body, and that's just not true. It doesn't have to be held in our body. So if you're an empath and you've been running that way because that's the way you just have run your whole life, and I personally believe we're all empaths, like how do we evolve our cellular structure to work differently as well, right? That we can witness but not absorb, that we can see but not receive. There is a beautiful story that's in Buddhism that really helped me with this one, since we're kind of in that vein with Thich Nhat Hanh. And it is a story that there was a man that came up to Buddha and was like so irate and so angry and yelling insults and just horribleness and just really just slamming and directing it all personally, intentionally at Buddha. And Buddha was said to stay in that place of calm and that place of center. And eventually this person got around to where they were mad. How are you not responding to me? Right? How are you remaining calm? And I can only imagine in this story, like I can see this Buddha energy, and I imagine the Dalai Lama's face kind of right in this story. And it was a smile, is what he was said to say back. And he asked them, if a man gives me a gift and I do not accept that gift, who has responsibility for that gift? And the answer was the giver. The giver has the responsibility for that gift. And so it invites us into right there this beautiful teaching that says we have to figure out how to say no. How to say no to when a part of us is trying to serve us something, when somebody outside of us is trying to serve us something, when an idea or a way of being, a version of ourself is trying to be served to us through another, that is not in our highest good and benefit to absorb or accept. And can we simply just not accept it and say, no, no, thank you? And then that leaves that with the giver. So the giver then is left to work with what it is they were trying to quote offload, what they were trying to convince, to bolster, to defend, to whatever. Like it's not a retaliation. It's not sending it back at them to them like a spear or a weapon. It's just simply leaving it for them to work with. And on your side, what is it that you have to work with? All the parts of you that are not okay with that. All the parts of you that believe you should do something with it. I have to absorb that because that's what my biology is telling me from my mirror neurons, that I need to absorb a part of what that person is saying or doing as a way to manage it or to apologize for it or to appease to it or to vibrate with that same frequency or words or way of being so that they see me and them and they stop attacking me. Right. And so we come into this idea of shadow sameness and look at, I've got a little bit of that in me. So we're okay. We're same tribe. We're tribe adjacent. Right. And all these different ways that survival self of us has shadow ways of keeping us safe. And can we say no? And can we love those parts of us, not make them feel bad, but can we help and sit next to them and help them realize, sweetie, honey, that's not real. You do not have to bear that burden. You do not have to abandon and abort the sense of self of who you really are to appease and to protect yourself. There's another way. And then we can go to our personal self that wants to say, yeah, I need to take it because I don't want to be rude. It's just going to make it worse and blah, blah, blah. And so some part of us takes this thing and we absorb it in and it comes all the way into our body. We can yet again hold those little parts of us and say, no, 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 come back. That's not who we are. I know that a part of us really wants this. We might even want an exchange in a positive. I think if I say yes to this, I'm going to get this over here. But that exchange, every part of our heart is saying, no, this is not a trustworthy, good exchange. This is not for the highest good and benefit. Even if you think it is, this is not going to bring you balance. Right. And so how do we hear that heart saying that? And so with our personal self, it's again not making it bad or ego is like somehow something to be kicked off the bus or transcended. It's actually no, to really honor my personal preference, ideas, wants, wishes, and desires. Like to say, of course, I see it. Why wouldn't somebody want that? And yet, will that bring us balance? To be able to ask that question brings us to where Thich Nhat Hanh was pointing us, which is the purpose of life is to be ourselves. So if I can find that version, if I can honor the shadow survival sides of me, if I can honor the defensive sides of me, the fearful sides of me, the protective sides of me, the personal wants, wishes, and desires and yearning sides of me, if I can give them all a place of honor within me and tend to them in beautiful, helpful ways, then I can actually find the choice that's going to bring me into the most balance, into the most freedom, into a place that will ripple out to the other, a place of empowerment, rooted in love, rooted in respect, rooted in this trustworthy strength, this weaving of a thread that is so incredibly strong that it can hold center, provide a lifeline for me, even when I feel strained at the edges of my system, like I have in the last few weeks. It's just been so straining. I want to go in there and snap my fingers and just make everything better. I want to be able to tell my children, like, hey, this is not going to touch you. You're fine. But I can't, because they would have to write the word female and woman and neurodivergent on their thing, and lover of life, an artist, and free thinker, respecter of life. Like, these are aspects of them. And honestly, that's a risky place to be right now. Right. And so I need to help them be with what is. That I can't just transport myself or somebody to another reality and only focus in on self and saying, this is about me and my reality and what I want to create and love and abundance for me, and not really worrying about where that love and abundance for me is coming from. Like, what is the exchange that I'm up to? What are the choices and how they're affecting that? Like, that's not a valid launching pad. And the heart that's really rooted in ourselves knows that. So there is this awakening that happens in once we discover our personal heart, which we absolutely need to do, which is says, hey, it's not about snapping our fingers. It's not about removing ourselves from any circumstances or transformation journeys or challenges that feel way beyond us, like what's happening in the collective right now. It's actually about, if I can show up as my true self, I can evolve my own system to where I can see these different levels of consciousness within me, then I can start to pick the soul led choice with conviction, with courage, with that peaceful warrior energy, building out a web that honors, loves, and respects myself, and therefore honors and loves and respects all life. It will guide me into how to show up in that collective, because it will guide me how to show up in my everyday life. Both will happen at the same time. And it's kind of a crazy thing. And it's a very uncomfortable truth, my friends, because once we start to awaken and once we start to grow and once we start to integrate it, we realize that this is not a personal path. This is a yes and of personal and collective, that we are the healers for self and for others, but not in the way that says we're responsible for them. It's by the way of saying, hey, I'm going to be with you while you figure out what to do with that gift you just tried to hand me. Right. Or I know that somebody else is going to be with you to hold you, and I'm being guided to step back. Right. That we together have that ability to decide how we want to show up personally. And then the way we show up personally will ripple out. And if we show up rooted in love, then we start to move from love all across the board. And together we start to weave each with our own unique thread that is needed, because that's the purpose of life, is for us to be ourselves, not to be somebody else, not to be like somebody else. I love that that was in this teaching. It was to be us, the frequency, the vibration that can only come from me. I love I heard this, and I think it was originally Neil Walsh, Ronald Walsh, I think. Thanks. I'm pretty sure. Is he held up a pen and he said, this is a little big pen. This is not a big pen. This is like one of those drawing pens, but imagine it's like the normal, regular, everyday pen. And he was like, this pen is like so many pens, millions of pens are like this big pen. And yet this big pen is completely unique in its vibrations, in its story, and its history. Why? Because I'm holding it right now and I've wrote with it. And what it will write, not everybody will write, but yet they're the exact same. They have the same potential, the same everything, the same ability to produce something. And yet it is through that connection with another being that they experience life all on its own, and how it's going to write its story vibrationally of what it's experienced, what it's been through, how it views itself, how it shares that voice. All of that is going to be unique. That's us. We are all worthy beings, full stop. We are all beings that have the sentience of our own thoughts, feelings, ideas, and inspirations, human and non-human. And we are all the quote same kindness with each other because we're all worthy of that pursuit of liberty and happiness, right? And we know that. Our heart is rooted in that. And yet, the way each one of us will experience and express and give through our own frequency and perceptions and ways of being to the whole, that is what will create this tapestry that weaves together, that just resonates with that deep ability to love and honor each other. And unfortunately, we don't have that collectively on board, right? Like collectively, we are lost in uh devaluing each other. We are lost in stories that try to make what I just said untrue. And create well, this pen wrote this thing, so therefore it has more value than this pen over here that was just used to do X, Y, and Z. Like we do all these weird things collectively, we are still there, and collectively this is what we're up to. And so this is again not just for humans, this is for all things, our environment, plant and animal beings. um, and because the plant and animal community and the natural world was the world that I felt most at home with, it was honestly the world that I escaped the human world from. I didn't want really truly to do very much with the human world. I was willing to work with the wounded hearts, the disregarded hearts. I was willing to work with the humans who had been something and experienced something to what I had, and were looking to remember their own worth. I loved working with that part, but the rest of the human world, not so much. I didn't really have a lot of allegiance to it. And I just kind of had this idea that if I kept chugging away in my own little slice of solitude and place of being, and in my own way helping people see quote horses the way that I saw them, or see tree or rock or river, or I was very shamanic at the sense of my brothers and sisters that are all around us, to see that as the same. And then they could see that in themselves, like all of a sudden that was like my focus. And it was a pretty beautiful practice that I was up to, but yet it was a pretty limited, because unless you got to me wherever I happened to be physically, I would share a little bit, but then it wasn't working. I would go to other people's barns and or show up in spaces like this, and there was like this weird disconnect, and I couldn't figure it out what was happening. And I would try to invite somebody into seeing something, and I didn't have the words to help them bridge the gap between what I was asking them to see themselves as worthy and wonderful, like Thich Nhat Hanh had, and to see their animal companions as their own independent thinkers, and that they have their own true sentience and all these different things. And I kept inviting them to then, when they were working with horses in partnership, and I was starting to teach facilitators how to facilitate and to work with equine partnered psychotherapy and coaching is my trademark version of it, because uh, it's not using them for it, it's partnering with them. It's when I started to do that, I realized there was again this huge disconnect that was happening. That I was sharing a message and I would watch people still force a horse, trap a horse, um, sacrifice a horse for a quote lesson for the person. And then when I would try to point out to them, look, you're asking this person to step into their own voice and value what it is, and what you're actually teaching them is slavery. What you're teaching them is subtle power and control. What you're teaching them is to appropriate and to force another being to do something for them for their own personal gratification, because that horse is not really free. And it was just really not landing well. And I was getting really frustrated and I just really didn't understand. And I went into the pasture, which is where I went every day. And I sat down and I was like really down on humanity at that moment. I was just like, oh, I don't know how to help humans see you all. And I was given, this is a little over 10 years ago now, I was given this very clear message that I wasn't supposed to just mm, teach people how to work with them. In fact, I needed to stop trying to bring them to the horses. And they asked me to do something I really was uncomfortable with and I did not like. And it was to come out from behind and come out from next to the horse and to show up with not asking the horses to do the heavy lifting, but human heart to human heart, to help humans see themselves, to help humans start to realize that they have the ability to wake up, to grow, and to integrate a new level of self because we aren't seeing it. We're stuck in generations upon generations upon generations of dogma, of unhealed trauma, of shadow tribalism, of firming up in subtle and not so subtle ways, old ways of being and thinking, and mixing that with now the instant gratification and the apathy and the disrespect for even their own life, that they said to me, how in the world do you expect them to see us? And I didn't have an answer. And I was like, I don't know. And then the next message that came in, I will hold kind of forever. It was clear that we need help, is what I heard from them. We cannot do this. We need humans to remember their true self. We need humans to believe in and understand the true power that they wield as creators. We need them to remember that they are not separate from nature, that they are stewards of nature. We need them to remember who their real selves are and to reconnect and to reestablish and to restore back their authentic self. And I realized while they were saying that, I wasn't connected to that. And if they could have winked, they would have winked at me. I was like, I had a pretty good like vibe to it, but it was like hit or miss, depending on what got triggered in me, right? And so this was not just a message for me to carry out into the world. This is a message for me and the world, right? It was a yes and that they needed us to remember that the medicine that we are rooted in as a human species is one of conscious choice. One of, do we choose to honor and respect and love and build from that with the web that we're weaving? Or do we build a different web? What are we creating? How are we creating it? And what are we up to? And the horses were really clear. And I think they were speaking not just for horse, but kind of all beings except for human and even humans too. We need you to help free yourself so that you can help free others. Find your light, let it shine, let it shift and guide you like a North Star for both yourself and for others. Remember, each moment that we shift, each moment that you shift, from being separated from your heart, that you are in union. Each moment that you allow yourself to shift from disrespecting to honoring, you are your true self. Each moment you allow another being to have their right to say yes, no, and maybe even if it doesn't match your wants, wishes, or desires, or it makes you uncomfortable because you have to now hold a boundary on your side, that brings you closer to who you truly are. Each time you can come to a moment, to a connection, to a request rooted in the medicine of love and stewardship in a healthy way, that is the moment that you come home and you create the home that we all need. And I can still feel the power that is in those words that I felt channeled in those moments sitting in that field with these beautiful animal guardians that shared that message with me. And again, it's not meant for me personally. It wasn't a special calling for me. This was a we. We need all of us to do this. And so about 10 years ago, I shifted on a dime. I stood up from that meditation and I was like, I have no way of knowing how I'm going to do this or what I'm up to, but this is my job. This is my calling. This is the web that I'm being asked to weave each day in little ways, mundane ways with my own life. What am I leaving in this life? Like, how am I showing up with my medicine of creation? What is the quote thumbprint or footprint that I'm leaving? Am I leaving it in at least a neutral place? Or am I adding more light, more love, more freedom, more laughter? What am I up to? What am I accepting? And what am I saying no to? And that in that saying no to certain things, no from moving from a place of survivalism, no from moving from a place of shadow personal wants, wishes, and desires, no from accepting the discharges of other people in their different states of what they're up to, no from accepting the quote collective norm of what it is. Like every time I said no, I was unplugging from these different ways of being that were rooted in that separation that the horses were trying to ask me to. So then the question came, what do I plug into? Well, they already had that answer. Plugging into love, into sentience, into hope, right? Each time I could exchange that, I was allowing myself to have more light, more ability to shine, and then ideally having reflectors up that let people see that light within them, recognizing that within them is their own version of that, what that looks like for them and how that was supposed to show up. So what I think is really interesting, in part one, I brought forward the spider energy and I kind of gave a hint to what I ran out of time from in that one of another beautiful energy that can help us kind of lean into this. And this is a little bit of astrology. So I am an astrologer and bringing that in. And so the astrology of this and the timing of it and the patterns that archetypally this brings forward and awoken in each and every one of us really resonates with what I believe the horses were asking 10 years ago and what I believe really is what Thich Nhat Hanh is pointing at, where he's like, don't look at like what did the finger like again, this is a lot of Buddhist practice, look at what the finger is pointing to and transcend to that. And what he was pointing to is that if we're going to be our true selves, if we're going to step into our purpose each and every day, we have to heal. Like we can't be turning a blind eye to these different ways, these different aspects of us are puppeting us from behind the scenes. We have to lovingly challenge the history of the past of saying, wow, what suffering was there that got us to show up this way? how did we get this far? In my personal belief, de-evolved off of what we truly are. Why? Because that's also within what he said. For you are wonderful just as you are, which means our core self has love, has respect, has balance. It doesn't misuse or misappropriate or devalue or do any of these other weird shadowy things. It doesn't do that. So how do we get that way? And what I find really interesting, just collectively, the timing of everything is in 1977, the year I was born. So you can do the math, you can kind of figure out how old I am. that, that is the year that we discovered what had been there floating around in the sky for a very, very long time in a place that the human eye could see it, but didn't see it. Chiron, the asteroid that had a number at the time, and then it was assigned the name Chiron. And to me, astrologically, just like unbridled change was assigned to me. It's not like I picked it. It came in and said, "This is the name of the business and the organization that we want to channel through you." It wasn't a Michelle choice. It was, "Hey, this is what's happening. This is the web that's being webbed. We and created," right? And Chiron was assigned to this asteroid that had been floating around for a little bit. And finally, in 1977, we found it. Why is that important? Because Chiron is the archetypal pattern of based on the mythology of the wounded healer. The idea that he was half mortal, half god. So the man part of him as a centaur was the god part of him, the spirit, the immortal side of him, and the horse version of him was the mortal side, the side that was on the earth and with that. And he was fatally wounded in an accident with him and his pal as he was trying to establish peace, is the way the myth goes. And in that myth, that wound that he got from that arrow from his buddy Hercules, like was unhealable. It was tipped in Hydra's blood, and so it was a wound that never healed. But yet his immortality kept him going. And so his mortality was in a place of suffering, a place of a wound that would not be healed, and his immortal self was not touched by that, and that just ripped him apart. And so he went on. He had already studied under Apollo. He had been adopted by him because he was abandoned as a child, because he was a result of a rape between a quote god and a nymph. And then the nymph was she turned herself into a horse to try to escape the god Kronos, and Kronos turned himself into a stallion and raped her. And then the result was a centaur. And the centaur, as a people, had been completely stripped of their ancestral lands, driven off the lands, been stripped of their rituals, of their healing, of their power, of their story, of their pride as a people, and forced into caves and reappropriated back into beasts of burdens and other ways of being to be housed. So you can feel the wounds. Chiron is a little baby. He has no control over what his ancestry has gone through. The feelings of being disfranchised, pushed off the land, devalued, thrown away, abandoned, the result of not even the choice of how to bring him in based off of just one being wanting something over another, right? And then a being saying, "This is so, I don't know what to do with this, and so disgusted by it, I'm going to chuck it into a cave." And I'm not even going to try to ask the gods to help heal it. I'm going to ask them to turn me into a tree so that I don't have to live with what those choices are anymore. And I get to have a completely different existence than having to work with that. That's all that's housed in the quote wound of Chiron. And then the healer comes in as he was found and brought to Apollo and start to be loved and to be honored. He grew into a great teacher, a philosopher, and in the myth, he became the one for all of the heroes in the land to come to and to be with. And he was in that thing of now going back to his people and trying to help them remember their heritage and their pride and their worth, and to reestablish that sense of self-honoring. And it was in the essence of doing that, of coming back in. And if you metaphorically see this, you will really lean into this idea that This is us. This is the what's sitting in the quote bones of us. This is the history of us, right? And a part of us comes back and says, "Hey, I've learned all these things. I've developed all these things. Now let me come back in and help these other aspects of me that don't know anybody. They've just forgotten. They've had too much trauma that separated them from remembering their truth. And I'm coming in peace, so to speak, to help broker that deal of that remembrance, and we get wounded in the process of that, right? And that wound wakes us up to the reality that there is a mortality, suffering, grit part of Earth School, and there's this other. So in the myth, Chiron spends the next 300 years trying to fix himself, trying to go about this way where he is able to, he learns about like herbology and all these other things, all the different aspects of a quote healer, he learns it and he becomes this like recluse eventually in a cave because he can't fix it, and now everybody starts to come to him to fix his problems and do the different things. And this is where the second part of this myth comes in. So first is in 1977. Why is Chiron important that it came in is if you look at the time of what was happening in the late 70s, this is that movement that shifted us from that the healer was somebody outside of ourselves that we had to go to. We had no ability really on a collective level to say we could take on our own wounds, that it's time to take on our own wounds, that we can't keep hiding from these wounds and just letting them compound on each other. We have to be willing to turn inward. We have to be willing to move into those parts of us that we feel are not able to be healed, right? And we have to start to develop this true belief that we have that power to learn, to shift, to change. So instead of it being somebody else's job and responsibility, it's now ours. And I believe that when we found Chiron as a collective and we identified it and we assigned it the name collective, that was the metaphoric initiation that to every single being on this planet that says, hey, healing is now a part of everybody's makeup. It's a part of everybody's birth chart. Every being. If I did a birth chart on them, there's a Chiron. It's there. It's a part of them. It's resonating with the different aspects within them. And so that means there is something in this lifetime that is a part of their nature to heal, to free themselves up on, and to work from. No longer is the template of we go to somebody, we offload, give them the gift of our pain, and they absorb it, heal it, and then we get to walk off with that discharged into another being. It's like, no, those gifts are all now being left at our feet, and we're being asked, each and every one of us, to say, heal thyself, know thyself, become whole, not become perfect. And that's what Chiron started to go a little askew. So in that 300 years, he started to recognize, I'm not going to heal this wound. I can't be perfect. And so he withdrew. He got hermity. He started to disengage from life and he was just enduring life, right? And yeah, people came to him. He would, quote, do his healing thing, but he wasn't actually engaging the fullness of his life, the mortality of his life with the spirit of his life. He was just enduring. And this is where in 1997, another asteroid was found. And the name that came forward for that one was Chariklo. And Chariklo is very hard to find in mythology because it is Chiron's wife. She is Chiron's wife. And different stories put her different ways, that she is this feminine energy, and the name Chariklo means weaver of light. And so, why am I bringing her forward in this one? Because she archetypally represents this yin energy where she went to Chiron and said, you're getting lost. You're getting lost. You're weaving together this idea of if I can't fix myself, my life has no value. If I can't fix myself, then I'm going to disengage. If I can't fix myself into perfection, then dot, dot, dot. And she said, there's another way. She bridged a gap that was seemingly undividable. And she started to say that some wounds will take different amounts of time. And we'll have some parts of us that are breaking down and some parts of us that are okay. And that's all right. Because if we weave this web of light together, the spider energy, but in a different form, then we can hold ourselves in a beautiful way that allows us to be a work in progress. We can tend to the parts that we need to. We can even work with parts that have been completely torn down and that we have to remove from and find new places to build, right? We can do all these things and we can find hope. We can find joy. We can find love. We can find pursuit of living a full life, even with the things that are not, quote, fixed, even with the wounds. And so she brought in an energy that said she blew the paradigm off of what he had spent 300 years trying to do, which was fix himself, and said, hey, but let's instead tend to that wound. Let's make it have as much ease and grace as possible, and let's re-engage life. Let's open to joy. Let's weave together some light that has hope and happiness, and that you are still worthy of living a life, even if there are these working edges that might or might not ever be healed. She brought forward this beautiful capacity. And I love Melanie Reinhart I don't have that book either. Sorry about that. She wrote in her book, Chiron, the Healing Journey. She's kind of like the leading like Chiron and really centaur astrologist out there who was like at the forefront. She is a pioneer in this field. And she wrote about Chariklo, and she said, it is the energy creates the capacity to tend to the suffering of ourselves and others and allowing life to fruitfully continue, regardless of our afflictions. That's what Charlotte asks us to do. So in 1997, when we had 30 years now, no, 20 years of Chiron up and running, one full Saturn rotation from where when we found him to where when we found her, it's like we had one full cycle to be able to say, hey, we need to go to the next level of healing. Now that we believe that we each have the power within us and it's not outside of ourselves, that we're waking up, that we have more authority over our own systems than we think we do. We're not stuck holding the wounds of our past, our ancestry, even our own personal lineage. We're not stuck holding our own experiences, the ways that we feel betrayed and caught off guard and victimized by life. Like we have a choice of how we want to show up for ourselves, and we can tend to our wounds, we can heal them, and we can show up with a level of stature and respect and love for ourselves. And it's not about the pursuit of perfection. It's not about getting to that promised land. And Charlotte came in to remind us, hey, we're going down the wrong path, personally and collectively. It's not about perfectionism. It's not about personal gratifications of one's wishes and desires. This is about rooting ourselves in the devotion of honoring of all life. So when we go on a healing journey, yes, we want to, of course, have as much, again, abundance, health, and wellness as possible. And sometimes that is not what's up. And so when that is not up, and when we can't quickly snap our fingers and make something shift from point A to point B, her energy echoes the wisdom of Thich Nhat Hanh's voice. And it says, in that moment, our purpose is not to perfect this. Our purpose is to be ourselves, not another. And if we can find that authentic version of ourselves, then wow, the limits all of a sudden, quote, unbridled. And all of a sudden, we start to be able to work with this energy on a level that we now come back to what the horses were reminding me of, which is they need us. They need us to wield our medicine as creator beings in alignment with who we truly are instead of what we have been doing collectively, which is one of a lot of trauma, a lot of survival ways that we don't even realize are there. They're so subtly embedded now. And then this personal wants, wishes, and desires that just kind of is, quite frankly, narcissistic, bringing for ourselves, but forgetting about respect for the whole. And so this is what's sitting in our bones. This is what's sitting in our heart and our cells. And like Thich Nhat Hanh and Chariklo reminded Chiron when he started to get lost, so is love, so is health, so is well-being, so is joy and laughter, so is the strength to tend to the wounds that we cannot fully heal for whatever reason, and still also be able to show up in life, right? Being able to, like Melanie Reinhart said, allowing ourselves to have a fruitful life, regardless of our ability to uh, eliminate our afflictions. Like, how do we do it with them? That is the question. And if we can do that, that's enough. That's wonderful. That's beautiful. That is the energy that is going to ripple outside of ourselves and impact everybody that we're with, because then we're willing to meet them and give them worth just as they are. We're willing to smile and to see them as amazing as they are on whatever stage of their quote journey that they're at. Like, all of a sudden, we are literally replacing the cellular data that's getting passed from generation to generation, and we're giving birth, we're unplugging from an old template, and we're saying, what template collectively do we want to plug into? So just take a moment. Let's again feel into that invitation from Thich Nhat Hanh. Feel into the invitation that the horses and Chariklo and Spider have given me, and now I've passed to you. And feel that strength, that it's both. It's knowing that we have that capacity within ourselves, and then the softening to be with what is. It takes that mix of yin and yang together, weaving together to create true balance for ourselves. So just what would that feel like in your body if you allowed both of these energies to support you? Chiron energy that says, I can turn towards the wounded parts of me. I can turn towards the injustice. I can turn towards the pain. I can turn towards the suffering with love, with Chariklo's energy, with compassion, with willingness to witness and see, but not to indulge or to eliminate, but to help it release. What would that feel like? What would those whispers be like coming from your heart and your soul? What would it feel like to have a Charliklo energy come next to you? Just if it feels good to you, open up to that essence. This is in other traditions, it comes in as Kuan Yin energy, or sometimes it can come in as the Madonna. I particularly like the Black Madonna energy if you're coming through that tradition, because it's she's willing to take the person who has been through life. And so remember that this energy will hold all parts of you, the scared parts, the angry parts, the rageful parts, the nervous parts, the overwhelmed, the depressed, the ones that are completely lost in the trance of unworthiness, the ones that are lost in that dance of hurting because they've been hurt and they just want to feel good because they've experienced so much loss. The parts of us that are collapsed and lost and don't even know to pick up their head anymore to look for love or support. Whatever they are, this energy says, come, I'm here. It's not to be commanded or cut off from us or fixed or, quote, handled in a way that's gruff and rough, demanding. It's a deep, honoring softness and yet a fierce strength that can hold these parts so that they can release. And they can remember what the Buddha was saying, which is just because somebody gives us a gift, we do not have to accept it. And so it's about reestablishing sovereign right. the liberty, the freedom to decide what to absorb, what to take responsibility for, what not to absorb, what to release, what to hold, what not to hold, based not off of a fear, based not off of a personal want, wish, and desire, but off our heart guiding us into what is for our highest good and benefit, and what is for the highest good and benefit for the whole. So just imagine right now, if you're feeling her energy or spider or another wisdom teacher that feels good to you, and I say you can find this energy in almost every tradition, from shamanic to mythology to quote wisdom traditions. And remember, they also remind you that there's another part of you. In addition to the survival and the personal, there's a part of you that holds your hopes, your dreams, and knowing. It honors our personal ones, says, yeah, I get it. I know, that would be amazing. And yet, this is kind of where I'm asking you to lean in. And this part has a strength and a courage attached to it. What ones of these types of threads that maybe you're familiar with, but your system wants you to rediscover, connect with on a deeper level? The theme of this season is all about connecting. So, what aspects of you and the threads within you does this energy want you to remember, to smile at, to say, I see you, and I understand, and I know that you are real and that you are here? And can you allow those threads to help guide you to the ones that it is time to come down? It is time to retire them, to stop weaving with them, to stop accepting them. If there's any parts of those in you that are ready to leave, then I invite them to return to sender. Put the gift down. And they don't return back with malice, they return back with love. They return back with kindness, because we know that the where they came from, that was born out of separation, that was born out of shadow fear, that was born out of ways in which they were not aware of what they were giving. And even if they were, that was still born out of pain and suffering. And so when we give it back, we give it back with love, we give it back with respect. We give it back with a blessing. May you find peace. May you find healing. May you find growth. May you awaken. And I release you. I come back to me and I give the same blessing to me. May I find growth. May I find a way to awaken to a new way of being. May I feel and know and be with what I am weaving each day. And can I feel the vibration of that thread and ask myself, is this the thread I want to lead with today? Is this the thread that my heart wants me to lead with today? And is this the thread that my soul wants me to lead with today? That's the practice. That's the intention for this week. Nice deep breath in and out. So those are the part one and part two. I would love to know how these reflections of the purpose of life, based off of the teachings of Thich Nhat Hanh, that our purpose in life is to be ourselves. And then that then invites us into that journey of awakening, growing, and integrating piece by piece into more of that true self, and piece by piece honoring and then letting go of the ways that bring us out of alignment with that. And I hope this reflection practice is helping you start to ask these beautiful questions of what am I weaving right now, and what thread would be optimal for me to weave with. Uh, who and how am I being asked to show up? Whatever way that question comes forward for you, I hope to hear how this brings that to light for you. And remember that it's about bringing that light, letting it shine, and then letting that uh, help others remember their light and letting them shine too. And together, it's just a beautiful tapestry of light that will shift and impact and help bring in the new template of where it is we are going, personally and collectively. Offering you light, love, and joy until the next time, Michelle Holling-Brooks. Thank you for listening to Soulful Practices. For more information on how to work directly with me or one of my guests, check out the show notes below. We'd love for you to also let us know what parts of this episode are speaking to you and how this practice is supporting you on your healing and spiritual journey. Please share this podcast with fellow seekers, travelers. Together, we can create a wave of soul-led beings in this world, offering you light, love, and joy on your journey. Michelle Holling-Brooks. Until next time.